Приготовились? Доброе утро!
Good
Доброе утро!
morning. Good morning, everyone. Today, today is the 7th of July, 7:07, and we start our grand marathon, the marathon in Inaprom online. So football is being watched with Baron Tips and Inaprom news are watched the with the tab and the smartphone on because we're trying to demonstrate very useful content for you. At the same time, on 5 platforms, we demonstrate our online conferences for you. And almost every hour during this day, we will start the new online conference and we will discuss a new topic that is related to global manufacturing. And you will be able to choose what to watch. And then you will be able to rewatch all those sessions that you were not able to attend. In the scope of the Marathon of Capitals, we will be able to connect to our studios globally uh, that were organized with the representatives of the Russian Federation abroad. We will go across the planet during the whole day. Before lunch, Asia and Africa, and after lunch, it will be Europe and America. The moderators of our marathon of capitals will be Yekaterinburg, Andrei Besedin, the president of the Urals Chamber of Trade and Commerce, and next to me, Suren Vardanyan, the vice president of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce of Moscow, the first guest in Moscow, the capital of the Urals and the capital of Inaprom, Evgeny Kuvashev, the governor of the Sverdlovsk region. And behind his back, you see wonderful, splendid Ekaterinburg. Evgeny Vladimirovich, good morning. I would like to welcome you. You are the one who will start our marathon of capitals. And to your opinion, during these years, what place the Inaprom occupied on the global map of the world? Before talking about global issues, we can speak about the international aspects. I would say what the Inaprom is for us in Ekaterinburg and for the Sverdlovsk region. The Sverdlovsk region is one of the best industrial centers in Russia, and not only in our country, but also it has the variety of different products being produced, starting with IT products, with machinery, metallurgy, and the entire spectrum of industrial aspects. And Inaprom was invented in order to promote the industry, to look for new partners, and implement new projects. We needed something very powerful, a very powerful breakthrough in terms of exhibition and congress activities. And we were looking for this breakthrough, but we were considering this issue, and we had some global events that took place here. It was the BRICS Summit, SCO Summit, Russian Chinese Expo, and GME Summit. And of course, as soon as we gathered this portfolio of events, we came close to construction of the exhibition center and the World Cup, the Football World Cup that took place here was also another leapfrog to provide comfortable accommodation for our guests. Annually, Ekaterinburg is being attended by more than 50,000 guests from different parts of the globe, from those companies that are the leading companies in terms of industrial development, launching new products in the market, and the communication at Inaprom platforms here in Ekaterinburg has very powerful cumulative effect. And based on the data that we have obtained, we signed more than 370 contracts for more than 500 billion rubles. As for the economic effect from Inaprom that takes place here in Ekaterinburg annually, is more than 3.5 billion rubles. This money is spent on development of hospitality industry and small and medium-sized businesses support. And of course, the Inaprom in Ekaterinburg is always a fest. And our sphere of services is waiting for this event. For 11 years of INAPROM, we had different partner countries. I would say that we need to thank our Minister of Trade and Industry, Denis Manturov, who created such an innovation when he started to invent the partner countries to host INAPROM. And we had Japan, China, Southern Korea, Turkey, India, and this year, Italy was planned as a partner country. And we hope that we will still maintain all of the agreements and we will be able to host INAPROM together because the program was really very interesting. We started to work on the agenda. We worked with our Italian colleagues, so we had things to demonstrate to each other, and our companies were oriented on joint efforts. Thanks. I would like to thank Anton and the entire team for the support and for sharing the idea of INAPROM online with us, because we also think of the effect from this INAPROM, because we're thinking of expanding our exhibition, and we will have the representatives mission on INAPROM in other countries, and we're working on the idea, and we're thinking on how to have INAPROM once in Russia, once in Indonesia, Egypt, and Uzbekistan, in order to be able to attract more and more partners for this platform. And as you've mentioned, Anton, this is the global platform. And for those who are engaged in development of the Congress and exhibition activities, would be those cities in which industry is being actively developed and enhanced, and the new technologies are being implemented. And this is our project that is associated with development of exhibition and congress activities, MICE activities. And this is not just the only event, because we host the construction exhibition here, we host medical exhibitions here, and we open the doors of our exhibition hall for different events. And I'm absolutely confident that as soon as the world will win in the battle with pandemic, we've recently opened the patios of the restaurants, and people are missing visiting restaurants. And I think people will have the same feeling towards INAPROM, and we are waiting for you to come in 2021. Thank you very much, Evgeny Vladimirovich, and thank you, the Sverdlovsk region, for the support of INAPROM. And we are waiting for INAPROM 2021 together with you. And I'm confident that after this pause, it will be bright and useful for business. Thank you for your participation. And I would like to give the floor to our Moscow studio of the Ministry of Trade and Industry and give the floor to Alexei Grudyev, Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry of the Russian Federation. How the world changed and how the trade and economic relationships with the partners changed. I know that you are in constant contact with the trade representatives of the Russian Federation. And what about the Russian companies? Russian companies, do they have more opportunities or more limitations? What do you think? Good morning. Thank you, Anton. Thank you, dear friends. I would like to welcome you on behalf of our ministry, one of the founders of this well-known international exhibition INAPROM in this new format of the industrial marathon. And this format has already demonstrated its efficiency, because for several months in a row, we host such events. And I would also like to compliment my colleagues, Ren Vardanian and Anton. You are like two commenters in the commander booth. And we have talked to discuss speaking about the consequences and the situation in Russia in general. It's sufficient to say that we are the connoisseurs of the East, and we know this crisis that took place in China, but we know how to treat these threats and challenges, and this would be the description of what is happening around. Here we see the gaps between the communications. We see that the markets are narrowing down. We see the reduction in the consumers' demand. We see the economic factors, the prosperity of population, demography, and we have the term corona crisis that was invented by the expert, and this is the term to describe on what is happening around. And of course, Russia is a very important participant in different international trade processes and in the system as a whole. And this system is subject to the effects from these challenges. And so we see the drawdown in our income. If we divide it into the raw market and non-raw market, we see that we're facing the problems, and we are now trying to understand what to go next. We see the stabilization and tendencies in recovery of some situations, and we are trying to understand what to do next and what role the business would play. Mr. Kulyshev, in his welcoming speech, already said that people are missing. And we think that business is also missing the traditional trade mechanisms. And we hope that the traditional markets and connections will recover very soon. And we're trying a lot in Russia on the governmental level, on the regional level. And we are developing different programs of support, financial support for businesses. We have the national plan that is ready to get funding for more than $70 billion that will recover the business activities and support those industries that suffered from pandemic. And we see the interest in recovery of businesses and the agenda that we have, and the participation of international entrepreneurs, the number of online conferences that we host, the new formats that we have, online business missions that we have when we are able to arrange the tour for our businessmen, virtual tour, and to different countries. It demonstrates that we have very good chance. And speaking about online, I think many of the participants of the today will support me that coming out of crisis, we will face the issue of transformation of different connections in the world, specific issues. And one of the trends in terms of transformation will be speedy digitalization and automation and implementation of no-man production. And this is the trend that will be enhanced, and we will see the share will increase. The share of services that are being provided remotely. We will have the skills when offices will not be attended by personnel. And we have to take this into consideration when we think of industrial scale projects. But this is the future. And nowadays, it's important for us to respond to those recovery signals that the market receives from the international trade system and to assist the recovery of cooperation relations and trade relations. And this is the task that we see nowadays. And along with the mechanism that we have already mentioned, we consider that we'll also engage our trade representatives, because last year we've launched the multi-level modernization program, and one of the priorities in this modernization would be the profound and complex support of the entrepreneurs and business society. And in these conditions, in conditions of pandemic, our trade representatives and the priority of these representative offices is to respond to those challenges that the businessmen and entrepreneurs face. And that is why we've tested the pilot platform together with the Russian Export Center that would respond to the challenges and problems that the businessmen have. And once we see the markets narrowing down and the limitations that the countries have to take into consideration in the time of crisis and support of the external trade companies, the Russian entrepreneurs are capable of making several clicks and send their inquiry to trade representative missions to get some consultancy. Today, you've already mentioned that our trade representatives take part in our marathon, and I think that they will speak about their work and about their progress much better. And I would like to wish you productive discussion for today. Thank you, Alexei. I would like to ask you not to leave. I know that our moderators have the questions personally to you, but we start our tour around the planet. And the first trade representative that we have is our trade representative of Russia in China, Sergei Nushin.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Happy to see you. Before we start conversation with you, I would like to thank Alexei Gruzdev for the support provided by the Ministry of Industry and Trade, all the departments and organization of our meeting, me being representative of the Moscow Chamber of Commerce, and our partners are holding consultations with our partners where the business should go. This is our key agenda. Thank you very much, Ministry of Industry and Trade. Sergei, I would like to ask you, first of all, China, the country which is of key importance for us, our neighbor, our strategic partner. What is happening today? How do you coping with this gap where we managed to appear in? How the China is transforming and how the process of preparation is active, or probably it's a restart, a reloading of the production? What can you say about that? Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. I would like to welcome you. Alexei mentioned that in China crisis, in Chinese crisis, is a word divided into two parts, opportunity and menace. Implementation of this terminology is something that we witness now. The year started very difficultly, and we shall confess that we are highly concerned about our trade relationship, because it's not a secret that China is the key economic partner of Russia. Recently, the turnover was higher than 100 million rubles and billion rubles, and our target is 200 billion rubles. And after what happened, we were concerned. Answering your question, I would say that probably it's a paradox, because it turned out the analysis shows that there was not a gap. We have statistics, and the data for 5 months have been published. We will see the new statistics, and the mutual trade turnover decreased by 4.3%. Imagine that on the background of what happened without communication, without logistics, without possibility to sign contracts, without ties. The number is just 4.3%. And the deeper analysis demonstrates that the decrease was reason because of the price for hydrocarbons. We can see these dynamics, and the indicators are growing. I would say that the milestone was set during that time. It's very interesting that we are discussing with our Chinese partners such aspect of our relations as food products supply and agricultural product supply. This industry is very important, but it never dominated. But this year, this supply of these type of products ranked second. It's dominating and it grew. I would like to draw your attention that the growth was 25.6% in comparison with the previous year. We are witnessing the development, which is very active at the moment. And the opening of the market contributed to that, especially in additional food products, meat, for example. The example as chicken meat was exported to Chinese Republic in the beginning of 2019. After 1.5 hours during this period of times, export to China is 50% from the total volume of export in this product. We can see large product, rapidly developing markets, which contributes to the fact that despite the pandemic, we do not feel this gap. We do not feel that we are suffering from that. And the situation is becoming even more interesting. These types of products, short-term storage products, I remind you that the market was opened for our entrepreneurs, for beef supplies, frozen products, and since the 1st of July, other types of beef. We require faster ways of transportation, because the traditional logistics by sea, when the products, the deep processed frozen products, could be transported for a long period of time, but now we developed the railway transportation, which is a faster one. It means not only active supply, but also the service and trade development, which is very interesting as well, and which is a separate point of our mutual trade turnover. And I would like to draw your attention to the railway transportation, railway supply, which we are discussing at the moment. They are discussed at other events which take place now. It allows us not only to reduce the period of transportation, but also to deliver the products to the center of the country with high populated regions of China. Previously, they did not receive these products by that and in these periods of time. Recently, the first supply of chicken was supplied to Chunchun, the city with population over 30 million people. It was the first agricultural express, let's say like that, which delivered the chicken to Chunchun. And the interest is growing among Chinese region to Russian products. And this is also because of logistics. We have a feedback. People try these products. Regional cooperation, regional interaction will become the key driver this year. And this will help us to overcome this gap which took place and which will lead our mutual relations to higher level. Taking the advantage of this opportunity and the presence of our partner, a person who represents one of the largest regions of China, I would like to give him the floor. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Lu Kun, Vice President of International Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Wuhan City and the founder of the company Sinecheng in Shanghai. Please take the floor.
Hello. Thank you very much. Yeah, really appreciate, the chance, given to me to make some speech and give some information about China and Russia trading to everyone. Actually, just like you discussing, the COVID-19 bring uncertainty to the world. Of course, also bring the uncertainty to the trade between China and Russia. But whether it's a chance or it's a challenge, it's a question to us. From my point of view, the mutual trade between China and Russia continue to grow even under the shock of epidemic. The growth rate of China imports from Russia is still the top among China's major trade partners. According to the latest statistics from the central government of China, from January to April this year, the trade between China and Russia was about 200 billion yuan, an increase of 3% over the same period of last year. Among them, China imported value is about 140 billion yuan, a year-on-year increase of 10%. As early as 2015, when China proposed Belt and Road Policy Development Plan, Russia was regarded as one of the top priorities the country of the Belt and Road partner with us. Two sides signed the joint statement on cooperation between the Silk Road Economic Belt and the Euro-Russia Economic Union, working together to build the Silk Road Economic Belt. The Belt and Road bring opportunities for industry development in Central and the Western region, promote the growth of exporting, and made the Central and the Western region become highlights of China foreign trading. Data provided by the Ministry of Commerce show from January to April, the export growth rate of the Western region reached 70%, which is 10% higher the average export rate of the whole China. And the proportion increased by 1.5 percentage points to 16.4%. The economic growth rate of the Central and the Western region leads the country, especially infrastructures, shows a strong growing trend as a key points for steady investment and the infrastructure shortcoming. infrastructure in the Middle West will remain a force for some time in the future. About infrastructure, the National Development and Reform Commission state that they will work with relevant Russian parties to focus on precise and effective of investment, focus on Central and Western region, continue to promote 8 vertical and 8 horizontal main channels of high-speed railway, improve the layout of a trunk line network, keep an eye on the projects under construction, and provide sufficient funds. So with those figures, we can see there are a lot of chance between China and Russia at this moment. I have very constructive talk with the Russian Commerce Department in China in the past 2 months. We have several meetings by phone, by face, even in this critical situation of the virus. We discussed, just like Mr. Sergey mentioned, about the beef business, agriculture business, and other chance. For example, when we are talking about central and the western part of China, there are some cities which is very interested for us to pay attention to. For example, Wuhan. Wuhan is a city which is quite famous. They have the population, 20 million people, and they are willing to bring Russian companies to promote Russian products, to buy the Russian products. And before the COVID-19, for example, for the food industry, our companies, our groups under the Wuhan government, we import 35 billion beef from South America. But due to this situation at this year, we decide to looking for the chance from Russia. And I do talk with some Russian companies in the past weeks. We see very interesting mutual topics, and we are looking for the chance to directly purchase, import from Russia, because compared with past, we already have the mutual logistics solutions. Our cities, Wuhan and other cities, Chengdu, Lanzhou, they already have the blockchain directly from Russia, Moscow. And we can create these channels to other cities of Russia. For example, Ryazan, for example, Novorossiysk, when we can set up this kind of direct logistics solution, we can purchase mass productive. For example, the beef, the meat, the agriculture, which we are looking for, which we are buying from other countries in the past, from South America, from other parts of the world. But why don't we buy from Russia? We have very, very strong willing to do that. And the population, the final consuming place is in the central and the west part of China. That's why I think, it's time for us to make something happen between Russia with China, especially pay attention to the central and the western part of China. For example, Wuhan, we have many things to discuss with each other. Let's talk with each other in the future about the agriculture, about the woods, about the bitumen, about the meat, all those kind of opportunities. Those opportunities benefit the Russian exporters, but also benefit central and the west part of China. Because in the past, we only can getting these cargoes from the coast of China by deep sea shipments. But now we can ship it directly from Russia via railway, directly through, China-Russia board or China-Kazakhstan-Russia board to those parts of China. And we assume in this year, at least there are 500 billion business between China and our parts, our group can do even in such critical situation. And we are not only making the trading with Russia, I think it's also a good chance for Russia companies, for Russia government to set up their food space in China. That means, they have their own facilities, they have their agents, they have their cargoes to exhibit to the final consumer every day and educate the final consumers to let them understand the Russian products is one of the top products among the world. The chocolate of Russia is better than Belgian chocolate. The beer of Russia is better than Netherlands beer. That means, we should bring those things to the China consumers. Let them understand made in Russia is one of the top things in the world.
Спасибо, господин Ликунь. Спасибо, господин Ликунь. Сурен Аганасович, мне кажется, важный вопрос.
Thank you very much, Mr. Likun. It's a very important issue of interregional cooperation because each Chinese region is equal to European country. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Likun, for the issue raised on regional cooperation. I believe that it's key important to establish our communication chains and technological solutions, including in the sphere of clusters, in the sphere of joint projects between our Chinese partners and Russian partners, Moscow partners. That is why it's a very interesting and important issue on the one hand. On the other hand, thank you very much for the logistics topic which was raised. It's very important. It's not only the logistics, but it's something more. It's a huge part of any technological chain. And the question I would like to ask both Sergey and you, Mr. Likun, we witness the breakthrough of Russian agricultural products to Chinese markets. It's a result of such complex solutions, including in the logistics sphere. There are other industries, high-tech sector and services, or let's say non-commodity sector, which services the technological solutions. Number one, to your point of view, which is the perspective of Russian service non-commodity goods on Chinese market? And number two, what do you think? What perspectives mutual tourism, education, and sport have? Because without this mutual culture exchange, only industrial cooperation is possible on the one hand, but on the other hand, when people do not understand the efficiency of the solutions, it can lead to worse results. That is why I would like to ask you, what is your opinion about the high-tech sector development and how do you see the non-commodity relations development? Sergey, please. Okay, I would like to notice that in your question, there was an answer actually, because you named all the spheres: tourism, services. On my side, I would like to say that, once again, we are talking about logistics, for example. Logistics is not only transportation from A point to B point. It's a separate trade industry. It's a services which requires legal services. It's a global applications. Our partners require that because it's not very simple. Just you enter the market and you start your business. We need logistics. We need legal services. And this sphere has critical mass. We notice it. The growth of this separate food sector, for example. Food products, just one point, one item. What's behind it? Logistics, transportation, custom clearance. I mentioned the train to Chongqing. It was not just like a logistically passed train. It was a customs transit, custom clearance. If we need to transport meat, it's impossible just to do that because it never happened previously before. And custom offices in China are not equipped with the necessary fittings, with the necessary equipment for expertise, for checking. And the trade representative office, with participation of the chief custom office in China, worked on solution of this problem. In Chongqing, for example, at their customs, they have all the necessary equipment. And these trained pass the border under the regime of the inner control. It's a separate market of custom clearance, custom services. REDS is very actively participating in regular express trains, which will take place 2 times a week. It's very difficult to add something, to invent something, because you have already mentioned all the spheres which we need to develop. We need to further develop that, and the reduction of all these limitations, especially for transfer of individuals who are crossing the border, will allow us to see progress in trade. Thank you very much for your answer. And I expect that this will allow our companies, service companies, not only find partners on the territory of China, but also to establish new common projects, which will be implemented in both China and Russia. Mr. Likun, what do you think about this?
Actually, I totally agree with you. Without the culture exchange, without the promotion of the high-tech products, or let's say no commodity products into the China, the pure commodity trading is boring. So the question is, how do I think about it? What's the perspective on it? Actually, I could say it's a blue ocean for Russian companies. Russia has golden culture in the past 100,000 years. Chinese understand this, but why the Russian company don't have such brand imagination in the past? Because we are lack of education to the consumers. We're not making prop market promotion for the culture, for the high tech. I understand because every year before the COVID virus, I travel to Russia 2 or 3 times. I understand Russia, Moscow, or different region has brilliant culture, high tech, service, all those things. That's why I said, capture the chance, enter into the central of China, do the proper marketing, educate consumer. Russian will be successful. That's my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Likun. We really hope for your support, and in the future we will closely interact on implementation of, as it was already mentioned, of the communications between our companies. Thank you, Mr. Likun. And now we go to sunny Uzbekistan. It's hot in Moscow today, but I think as for Tashkent, it's even hotter. We have Andrei Makrosov, the trade representative of the Russian Federation in Uzbekistan. I would like to welcome you. Thank you, and hello, we are happy to see you. Please have your sound on.
Андрей Иванович, мы вас не слышим. Включите
So we cannot hear you. Please switch on your microphone. Okay. Dear Alexei, dear moderators, dear colleagues, I'm happy to see all of you, to hear all of you, and I would like to wish health to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of today's event for the opportunity to take part in it. And once again, I would like to introduce my guest to you. This is the director of the Center of Development of Innovative Projects of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uzbekistan, Uram Tishabayev. He is the head of the organization that can provide an interesting core and raise this core into investment project that would be profitable for all of the participants. This is a magician, we would say. He is the most important person. Yes, he is the one who is very much respected in the Republic. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Tishabayev. Thank you, thank you. Dear friends, the first traditional question will be addressed to Andrei, to Mr. Makrosov. We ask this question to everyone. How Uzbekistan is developing nowadays, and how Uzbekistan is overcoming this crisis that occurred in the very beginning of this year. Speaking about the effects from coronavirus infection, we would say that it makes a negative impact on the economic activities in Russia and the growth of the domestic product. And speaking of the forecast of the international experts, we will have 1.22% of growth in economy in comparison with last year, which was over 5%. Speaking of the overall trade of Uzbekistan with its trade partners, we would say that in the recent years, the increase in the turnover, it was increasing by 25%, and based on 2019, it was 290 billion US dollars. But as for the May, we see the reduction by 16% to 13 billion US dollars. The volume of production in our country in comparison with the same period of the previous year went 5% down due to quarantine measures. The production of the commodities and goods was decreased in many of the companies. 145 companies just lost their profits, and about 13,000 food production companies also have certain drawbacks in the profits of their companies. Speaking of exports, we see the major reduction in food products by 26%, natural gas almost twice, as we used to have. The services went 30% down. As for import, we see the reduction in all goods and commodities from 10 to 20%. In this connection, and in connection with mitigation of the virus effect, the Ministry of Economy provides support to those business fairs and entrepreneurs who suffered from this pandemic. Speaking of these measures, we would say that here we have different compensations on how the interest rate on loans. Also, we topped the tax inspections till the end of the year, and we also provide support for the population. Speaking of the measures that prevent this infection from spreading, Uzbekistan managed to increase the production of protection means and medical masks. Production was increased by 280 million per day, and as for the overalls, protective overalls, 150 units per day. Since the moment when these quarantine measures were brought into action, we have a number of companies that are increasing in the amount in the country, and such capabilities allowed Uzbekistan to start export of their individual protection means. Just recently, we signed a contract for supply of medical masks and protective overalls for more than $100,000 of US dollars. And recently, we started to provide individual protections means for free in those areas where we have the highest concentration of population. We've also started to produce the devices for lung ventilation, and this production was organized as a joint effort with the Russian company. This company is called Kiran Asia. Along with that, in our republic, we continue transformation in terms of transformation of our institutions. We deal with liberalization of our legislation. We create the free economic zones. We enhance the development of strategy of development of our country. We have different financial mechanisms that stipulate localization of production at the territory of our republic. And based on the opinion that independent experts have in speaking about the connections of Uzbekistan with the global world after the crisis ends, we will concentrate on agriculture as well, with export-oriented production. Due to reduction of food products in other countries, agriculture became one of the major emphasis in terms of development of the internal market, reducing unemployment and exploring the new export market. Speaking of priorities for the government in the next years, we're speaking about the increase in the international tourist flow into our country. and increase the income that we get from the tourist inflow. We would like also to mention that in Uzbekistan, we bring to life different investment projects that are being approved within the scope of our investment project program. We bring to life different investment projects, and for this investment projects, we haven't determined the partners. And these partners we can find among the Russian companies. In briefly, this is all I was going to say about this issue. Thank you for mentioning very important things, that businesses had the possibility to think of the challenges. They were thinking on how to solve these challenges, but thinking of the possibilities and possibilities that they can bring to life. Today, in our Moscow Chamber of Trade and Commerce, we receive a lot of information from Uzbekistan, and we get a lot of information from the embassy in Russia, a lot of ideas from the businessmen, and we receive the information from you as well. We provide it to our businessmen, so for them to be able to think of the ideas of how to approach the market. Here I would like to ask you a question. We all understand that it's important for business to see how the financial mechanisms are being built up, and the sphere of contact between the banking system is very important. What do you think about the idea of having representative offices of the Russian banks in Uzbekistan? This is not a very simple issue, because there could be different solutions to this issue, but none of the business projects, none of the global deals could be solved if it's not supported by financial instruments. None of the projects that has something to do with the tourist sector can develop, because if the tourist does not have the opportunity to use the credit card he's used to, is an issue. That is why the mutual integration between the banking system of Russia and Uzbekistan. What do you think about this? Maybe this is a question to your colleague as well, but I have a separate question for him. So I would like to say that at the moment, when we have for the external trade operations in Uzbekistan, we mainly deal with the US dollars. And also we operate with other currencies, including rubles. Some of the large Russian banks think of approaching the Uzbek market, and they think of opening the representative offices in Uzbekistan. But we have different banking formats, like providing the loans to the companies, Russian companies in Uzbekistan. They have special credit lines. They interact with Uzbek companies. Also, they think of placing the valuables in the market. We consider cooperation with such banks as Sberbank, Neshekonombank, Roseximbank. We would also like to mention that Roseximbank, which is one of the banks of the Russian Export Center, was the first bank among the Russian banks. They've declared that they opened the correspondence account in Uzbek sums, and also they've opened the account in rubles. What it means for the businessmen of Uzbekistan and Russia, this is a new opportunity. This is a new opportunity in using the international mechanisms in international currencies, and this way we can reduce the risks and mechanisms of the international currency market. And here I would also like to mention about one more direction of cooperation between the Russian Export Center and us. This is the support for the participants of the external economy activities. As you know, since May 2019, in the scope of implementation of the uniform concept of promotion of the export abroad, together with the Russian Export Center and the Russian Trade Representative Office in Uzbekistan, we've launched the group of support for the market promotion. Here, I would like to say that participation of this group since May 2019 through May 2020, by means of this group, we've signed different contracts for very substantial amount of money. And the question I would like to ask to your colleague, to Mr. Tishabayev, Please tell us, when will we see the Trade House of Uzbekistan in Moscow, and what format this Trade House will be created? Will it be the government company, or will it be the government or private partnership? To what extent it will be implemented here in Russia? Dear colleagues, thank you very much for invitation. Especially, I would like to thank Mr. Makarousov for inviting me here. It was very, very interesting introduction. We are trying to do something, and I would like to say that in principle, together with Andrei, we came to an agreement that together we will establish the project office. It will be the joint Russian-Uzbek project office. We will have Andrei as a partner and the expert center from the Uzbek side. And in the forthcoming 6 months, we will introduce very interesting projects to the Russian community. And we will think of how to promote Russian investments and technologies in Uzbekistan. From the point of view of coronavirus and this pandemic, this is really a very interesting story on one hand, but here I would like to mention that speaking of the results of the first quarter and investment cooperation and trade and economic cooperation, we see the figures are very optimistic. And I do hope that if the same dynamic is maintained, because usually the first 2 quarters are not very pessimistic, we are speeding up by third and fourth quarter. And if we maintain the dynamic of the first and second quarter from the point of view of investment and trade and economic cooperation, we will exceed the indicators in both of these issues. We will exceed the indicators of 2019. That is why here I would like to say that this whole story, the story of coronavirus and etc., this stipulated, I would say, the cooperation. Everybody understands that everyone has to look for partners, and all understand that they have to keep the partners, because we deal with a story when the contractual obligations stopped being fulfilled. From the point of view of the standpoint of our government, we follow this issue and we try to follow the fulfillment of obligations by our Uzbek companies before the foreign partners. Probably this is the main difference of our country in this particular situation. This is in general. And now, speaking about the banking cooperation, I would like to say that the banking market is just opening. It's really a wonderful moment for the Russian banks to take their place, to occupy their place. And this is what has recently been made by one of the Kazakh banks. They've got a full-scale license for banking operations in Uzbekistan. That is why I think that this is something that we have to work on. We have to proceed on this issue for the Russian banking system to be represented in the Republic of Uzbekistan. As for trade representation or the trade house or the exhibition, about 10 days ago, we visited Moscow. First of all, we would like to express our gratitude to the Russian host that pavilion number 66 was given to the Uzbek Republic, and historically it happened that this used to be the pavilion that belonged to the Soviet Socialist Republic of Uzbekistan. And now the work is in progress, and we think that we will complete the work in this pavilion by early October. And at the moment, we are planning that it's going to be the long-term acting representative office of Uzbekistan and the Russian Federation that will host different topical exhibitions to demonstrate achievements of Uzbek companies in terms of demonstrating the products of Uzbek companies. I would say that in the recent 3 years, a lot has been made. And a lot of interesting products appeared in the market of Uzbekistan, which could be competitive with products that are being imported by the Russian companies from other countries. Speaking of functioning of this pavilion, I would say that we'll have the permanent exhibition made in Uzbekistan. And we will come to an agreement that every month it will be a dedicated month. For example, month of textile of Uzbek products in Russia. Personally, I would like to have the month of Uzbek grapes. It's a very specific topic because you know that we grow different types of grapes. We will have a dedicated month of our winery because we are now trying to raise our winery system. Now we are developing and we see that electrotechnical industry is very well developing. We have tourism, we have things to demonstrate. This will be a platform of exchange of opinions, exchange of contacts, exchange of business relations. And we think that it will be functioning from mid-autumn this year. This is the situation. Thank you very much. I think that along with the month of textile or grapes, we will have the permanent Uzbek cuisine in this pavilion, and we will see a wonderful Uzbek restaurant with the Uzbek specialties. By the way, grapes would be very well going along with this cuisine pavilion, and I think it will be a very good representation of the East, of the cultures and traditions of Uzbekistan, and it will be the place of attraction for the people to come and taste the cuisine and culture, and to see the traditions of Uzbekistan and to see the traditions of your nation. Of course, thank you very much. And we will try to bring this to life, and we will try to combine everything. Thank you very much. And personally, I was very much surprised on how our main fair is being recovered. We see the real restoration of our main trade fair, and we see our partners from Uzbekistan. They're trying to be present in this important fair place as we used to have here in Moscow. And now we go to another capital, to Cairo. Cairo, the gates to Africa. And undoubtedly, Cairo is the first foreign city in which we hosted our first INNOPROM Big Industrial Week. And we have on air our good friend of INNOPROM for many years, Dr. Ala Ez, who is the Secretary General of Association of the Commerce Chambers of Africa. And I would like to welcome you, Dr. Ala. I haven't seen you for ages. Hope everything is okay with you. And I would like to ask you to ask interesting questions. And I would like to give floor to Andrei Besedin to ask questions from the studio in Ekaterinburg to you. Dear friends, it's really nice to take the relay from our Moscow friends and colleagues and to ask these questions from such a studio. I'm really jealous about this atmosphere that your pair, your couple have created during this event, in spite of the fact that you're feeling at the moment. And even though we are in a different time zone, we are in one and the same place. And I cannot but take the chance on speculating of the situation of having the microphone in hands. And I cannot but welcome all of the participants of our grand-scale global marathon international event from the small homeland of Innerprom, because this is the place where it started from. For more than 10 years, it was growing and it was gaining the audience, countries, partner countries, new ideas in industrial and innovation spheres, in cultural sphere, and new projects. And it demonstrated that Innerprom will not be frightened by anything and cannot be stopped by anything. And that today's event demonstrates on how strong and interesting this platform is. And the atmosphere that we have here for more than an hour, it makes us think. I've even forgotten about what is happening around, behind the walls of our tremendous space that we have today. Everything is so positive today, but nevertheless, we have a very specific issue that we discussed today. We are meeting and we're discussing issues on the background of today's situation and the different challenges that we have today. And the issue related to pandemic remains a very specific issue, not just the impact of pandemic on the health of the citizens of our countries, but also the impact and the pressures that it makes on the international economic development. Dear Mr. S, I'm happy to welcome you here in Cairo studio. And the first question I would like to ask, this is, I would say, my duty question. Do you have a feeling that the situation related to distribution of coronavirus, do you have a feeling that it affected the trade and economic relationships between Egypt, African countries in a whole? If yes, then in what sense?
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure being with you here today. It's my fourth Innerprom, so it became sort of a habit, seeing friends from all over the world, not only our friends, dear friends from the Moscow Chamber and Formica, and miss being actually in Ekaterinburg, where it's 40 degrees now in Cairo. So I think being in Ekaterinburg would have been a nicer option. Answering the question, we are not a separate island. The whole world is affected. Unfortunately, Africa is more affected than some other countries for several reasons. We're seeing for the first time in 25 years a recession in Africa. We had 2.4% GDP gross, above on the average all over Africa. And according to World Bank, IMF, and different organizations, we're expecting to witness minus 1.5 to minus 5% GDP negative growth. So it is a major problem that we're facing. Luckily, maybe you mentioned Egypt, my country. I'm speaking on behalf of Africa, but I cannot ignore my country. We're the only country in Africa and the Middle East where we have positive GDP growth. We have 2.4%. And more important, we have even increase in our exports by 2%, not a big figure, but when the global trade went down between 20 and 30%, that's a huge figure. Africa was confronted, like the rest of the world, but more important, by a double supply demand shock that arrived in 3 successive waves. The first, naturally, like the rest of the world, was China, which forms about 20% of the trade with Africa. And for some countries like South Sudan, 98%. So these countries were totally affected. Also, FDI that went down, where most of the FDI were coming from countries that were affected heavily, so it started going down. The second wave is from OECD countries, mainly from Europe, including Russia, where the lockdown and the halt of tourism has affected African country, and this constitutes about 30% of trade, which goes up to almost 80% in countries like Tunisia. The third and the biggest problem we're having is our meager inter-African trade, which is about 14 to 16%, has been affected very heavily because of border crossing problems. And this is affecting also one important thing, which is the informal cross-border trade, which is around 1/3 of African trade. But as business community, we don't see problems. We see opportunities. And here is where Russia can hop over. Opportunities where African countries are net importers of their food. About 50% of Africa's food is imported. Yet Africa has 60% of the unused, uncultivated arable land of the world. So here is where an opportunity where Russian companies, Russian technology, Russian equipment can hop on board. The second element is pharmaceutical and COVID combating equipment, where most of it, almost half of it, comes from European Union, India about 20%, and the rest of the world on a lesser extent. Russia is one of the world leaders in pharmaceutical manufacturing, and third country cooperation that actually Anton and myself have been preaching in the Industrial Big Week in Egypt, where we had all African countries. We're looking at having Russian technology, not investments, Russian technology manufacturing in African countries, pharmaceuticals that raw materials come from Russia and machinery equipment come from Russia, to export to Africa, where we have one major advantage: accelerated registration. So in few months, you can register that product that's manufactured jointly, locally, and export to Africa, where it takes you 3 years to register if you come from Russia directly. Africa's nightmare, almost 50% of exports from Africa are raw materials and commodities. And these raw materials and commodities, with the disruption of the supply chain, slowdown of global supply chain and global manufacturing, have been affected, not to mention oil and gas, which is another major element that affected some countries specifically, where it's about 90% of their GDP. However, working together, using again Russian technologies for third country cooperation is the way forward. We can benefit from the reshaping of the global supply chain that we're witnessing today, where African countries, Russian companies can work hand in hand with African countries to start locally producing and benefiting not only from inter-African market, but also re-exporting to third countries on global basis. Let me close this element by one important issue. President Putin and President Sisi, as president of the African Union then, in 2019, they co-chaired the first Russia-African summit. And there were 43 heads of state. The spirit was positive. And in the declaration, there were 8 major elements on trade and economic cooperation, where we're promoting trade, industry, agriculture, investment, infrastructure. And this is the way forward. We have to activate and implement the declaration of the first Russia-Africa summit, and using multilateral financial instruments that are available for Russian companies, hand in hand with African companies, including Egyptian companies, to manufacture, invest, whether in infrastructure, in manufacturing. We have the African Development Bank, the African Exim Bank, not to mention a host of Arab funds who are pouring billions into Africa. And what we're looking for is the technology provider.
Thank you very much for your answer to Andrei's question. There are 3 of us, 3 moderators. It's not like we are sitting here, 2 of us, and you are far away, because you are sitting at the very top of the city. I give you the relay, I give you the floor with pleasure, knowing that you have questions which you would like to answer. Our guest and colleague from African continent, that is why I give you the floor. Thank you very much. Dr. Az, happy to welcome you here at our event. And I'm highly interested to talk to a person who represents not only African continent, but the country which history we study at school, and which has very rich experience, and such an artifact, which I would, if I could say, which we have from the very childhood when we are talking about Egypt. I would like to ask you, as a vice president of the chamber, which is responsible for foreign economic trade, the key problem or key issue in relations and trade operations between Russian companies and African companies is the issue of logistics, transportation, and logistics is quite expensive. The cost of reloading in seaports is very expensive. What about the roads to deep of the continent, which is impediment of the whole process of cooperation? Considering the fact that we work with the Asian countries, it's much cheaper, despite the fact that the distances that we have with Africa are smaller. What about the African Chamber's opinion on that issue of logistics?
Thank you very much for this important question. Actually, it's core to our global and bilateral and inter-African cooperation. Though I would have wished to be in Moscow Chamber today, like we've been last year, and to enjoy the beautiful Moscow environment. But again, I'll repeat, as business people, we do not see problems. When there is a problem, there's an opportunity. And this is what we should hop over. The answer is simply, yes, there are problems in logistics. However, it is demand-driven, it is progressing, and it's spearheaded by 4 key pillars. First, the need. Africa has 1/8 of the world population. So we eat, we consume, we import, we buy. So we need to have logistics. And we have a $2.6 trillion GDP, consumer spending of 1.4 trillion. And we have, like I mentioned, 60% of the uncultivated land, 50% of the world plutonium, cobalt, diamonds, 11% of oil and gas, 4% of coal, and the industry has doubled in the past decade, which means there is a huge need and demand. Then we have internal. The long-awaited African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was supposed to be operational a few days ago, but with the COVID, will be postponing probably for a couple of months. However, this will upgrade the inter-African trade by 60%. And it includes 55 nations with a GDP of 3.4 trillion. And this, again, creates the internal demand. External, I'll use Egypt as an example. We have free trade agreements with custom-free access. So any Russian company that manufactures in Egypt can export to 2.7 billion consumer markets without customs, without quota. We're talking about the European Union. We're talking about the Arab world, United States through the QIZ, COMESA, Mercosur, and I call upon our friends in the Moscow Chamber to support us to speed up the Euro-Asian Free Trade Agreement to reach 3.2 billion consumers. And then this has created a huge boost in the infrastructure in Africa. We're working on several channels. One of them is creating and identifying hub ports with logistic and industrial hinterland. Example is the Suez Canal corridor that you have visited before, where we have the Russian industrial zone, the Russian logistic zone, to be able to cater to a huge market. And let's not forget that 40% of the world trade passes next doors, 10 meters away from that logistic zone. There is a lot around Africa. We're talking about Djibouti, Cape Town, Mombasa, Tanjamed, and the list goes on. And then crisscrossing Africa with superhighways. Cairo, Cape Town, going longitudinal from north to south. Safagana, Jamina, Dakar, crossing Africa from east to west, linking the Red Sea with the Atlantic Ocean. And Alexandria, Rabat, Dakar, linking the Mediterranean part of Africa. And then huge super railways where we thank China actually for being the key investor in these these railways, like the Mombasa, Nairobi, and the list goes on. So we are crisscrossing Africa with superhighways and railways. We're upgrading airports. We are creating hub ports that are linked to the world and naturally to Russia, but Russia will be to Egypt through Eastport Said. And then we're creating or replicating what the European Union has done, which is the motorways of the sea. So we're having short sea fast trips between these hub ports and smaller ports catering to all these countries. and touching upon the superhighways and touching upon the railways. So did we reach it? No, we are in the process, but we have achieved between 60 to 70% of what is needed. Remaining 30%, again, is an opportunity. It's a gold mine, and we invite not only Russian companies, but companies from the whole world to benefit from this opportunity.
Спасибо большое, господин Elias. Я очень
Thank
рад
you very much. I'm happy that you sound so positive, and I'm confident that the companies from Russia could be present at the African continent. It will contribute. And another question, as a gratitude from the Russian University of People's Friendship, many students from Africa studied in both Soviet Union and Russia. They had a very good education, to my point of view. Now they work in different countries of the African continent. And of course, the further process of cooperation in the sphere of education. What do you think about education? And which practical potential could we have in these joint human resource results, which we already have on both professional and cultural sphere? Because students are not only professionals, it's not something that serves, it's not just industry and services, but what is the potential of cooperation in the sphere of education and in the sphere of training of experts, of high-skilled personnel between Russia and Africa?
Thank you for this question, but before answering it, I'll touch upon the word confident that you have mentioned. Yes, I'm confident. In the last two INNOPROMs, we had huge delegations from Egypt participating, as well as African countries, and tens of Russian companies today are manufacturing trucks, tractors, equipment in various sectors and re-exporting to the whole world, not only to Africa. So I'm confident because what we are doing today and what we have been doing in the past years and what we've done with Anton in the big industrial week has resulted in positive investments, in positive technology transfer, in positive win-win, where components come from Russia with technology, assembly in local factories, existing local factories, we're not talking about new investments, for local markets, re-export to Africa and re-export to the European Union, to the USA, to the whole world. So I'm really confident. Coming to your question, students, as we call them, they're ambassadors. They're lifetime ambassadors. When they come to a country, they have friends, they have affinity, they understand the culture, they understand the business culture. Moscow has backed African countries over the past half century in their struggle for independence. And during that process, thousands, and thousands from Egypt even, African students were invited to study undergraduate or postgraduate in Russia. And a lot of them either became high-ranking government officials, including ministers, some of them heads of state, as well as business leaders. And they still have the relation with their old friends and colleagues in Moscow, as well as institutions and the government. I'll give you an example. One of my cousins, he has his PhD in the Moscow University. Today, his children have a huge industrial facility in Egypt using Russian technology, importing Russian raw materials, and exporting to the whole region. So it really works. A large number are also promoting bilateral cooperation in construction, example in Egypt, the nuclear power plant, factories and manufacturing, oil and gas projects, agriculture for export all over Africa. Also, they're supporting Africa's return to the continent. Let's not forget that Moscow has signed in the past 3 years only 20 agreements with national governments in Africa, and 7 of them has been in 2010. And 10 of these has been the first ever cooperation agreements between Russia and Africa. And all of them include education, which is actually the way forward for bringing together friendship, cooperation, understanding, technology transfer, and long-lasting ties between our countries, Russia and African nations.
Спасибо.
Спасибо большое, доктор Элайс. Спасибо вам большое.
Thank you
Мы-
very much. Thank you so
Спасибо.
much. We sincerely believe that the students from Africa will continue go to Russian universities, which will allow not only our countries cooperate, but it will allow business to have the personnel which understands the integration, the mutual cooperation and culture of our countries. Thank you, Dr. Allah. Always happy to see you.
Thank
Hope
you.
to see you soon in Cairo, the city which I personally like very much. And we travel from Asia to Africa. And now we turn around and suddenly we come to Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia. And we have Sergei Rostomachov, trade representative of Russia in Indonesia.
Приветствую категорически и предоставляю слово Андрею Беседину. У него есть вопросы для вас.
Вот так мы и путешествуем. Сначала из Москвы в Каир, а потом из Москвы через Екатеринбург в Индонезию.
Для нас нет ничего невозможного, особенно в рамках такой серьезной площадки, как крупнейшая промышленная выставка России «Инопром», которая давным-давно уже не промышленная выставка России, стала международной площадкой. Сергей Юрьевич, добрый день, рад приветствовать вас, гостей в вашей студии. Я сегодня буду вашим ключевым собеседником в этой части нашей сегодня насыщенной программы. Ну и в первую очередь я бы попросил вас представить того участника, который сегодня делит с вами ответственность за ответы на вопросы по столь интересной.
The participant who shares your views and ideas with the audience. I would like to welcome you as a participant, and I would like to introduce the participant from the Indonesian side, and I hope that we've all listened to the answers to questions that we raise in such not a simple situation, the situation of crisis, situation that you have in Indonesia, and how these difficulties that were associated with distribution of pandemic, how this affected this region, and how the country managed to respond to these challenges. Thank you. Thank you very much to organizers, to the Ministry of Industry and Trade, to be able to participate in such a representative business forum. In the first turn, I would like to introduce our Indonesian colleague to you, Mr. Didit Ratam, to you. He is the head of the Committee on Cooperation with Russia of the Indonesian Chamber of Trade and Commerce, as it is called KADIN in Indonesia. This is a very important organization that integrates all of the branches and representatives of all branches of industry. They are members of KADIN. This is more than 180 different associations that are members of KADIN, and KADIN has representatives offices in 34 regions of Indonesia. And Mr. Didit Ratam is our good and reliable partner. And without his participation, none of the events with participation of Russian business representatives takes place. As for your question, I would like to mention that Indonesia started this year on a very good level. And as for the first quarter, in spite of the beginning of pandemic, we demonstrated positive results, unlike other regional countries. The GDP of Indonesia in the first quarter increased by 3% almost. The currency reserves increased. And speaking of the purposes of economy stipulation, the Central Bank of Indonesia reduced the interest rate 3 times. But starting from April and May, the situation started to get worse, and we see that the external trade is going down and the import is going down. In May, Indonesian import went down by 15%. At that time, we see the reduction of supplies of machines, equipment, and raw materials for industry. And this, of course, makes a negative impact on economy and negative impact on bilateral relationships. The government undertakes different steps on support and stimulation of economy, support for SMEs, and development of healthcare system. This year, the government allocated about 50 billion US dollars for these purposes. And I do hope that these measures will have a positive impact on further economic development of the country. And the government developed two scenarios of economy development this year. One of scenarios is the basic scenario that considers that the GDP this year will increase by 1%, and the negative scenario that says that the GDP will go down by 0.4%. The international institutions provide different forecasts. For example, the Global Bank, the World Bank forecast that this year the economy of Indonesia will go down by 3%. The International Currency Fund is more optimistic in terms of forecasting and forecast only 1% in reduction. We'll see. At the moment, the situation in general is under control of the government, and we consider that we do not have the statistical data for the second quarter. It's too early to make certain conclusions, but we consider that the second half of this year will be more difficult from the point of view of counteractions to this crisis challenge in the global economy. Thank you very much. If you let me do this, I will ask several questions to you, and then we'll proceed with our honored guest. Thank you very much for such a detailed answer, professional answer. But as for me, I heard that your words sounded very optimistic, speaking of the forecast for the future, speaking of the World Bank forecasts and the international authorities forecast. And I think that Indonesia will remain positive and will still be on the positive level. The question is, we understand the willingness that Russia has on cooperation with Indonesia, because this is really profitable to cooperate with such a country as Indonesia. And one of the confirmations of this fact would be the fact that annually we have the forums in Moscow, Russia, Indonesia. Unfortunately, the forum that was planned this year was postponed till future. But as it was declared, the main idea of this forum was the enhancement of business relations and cooperations between Indonesia and Russia in infrastructure, energy, tourism, and trade. That is why I ask my question. Speaking of today, what level are the relationships at the moment in terms of interaction in infrastructure, energy? As for tourism, I have the understanding more or less, but if we're speaking about the enhancement, how can we enhance it? What can we do in terms of strengthening and improving our relationships with this country, very promising country? How can we achieve another higher level? Because these relationships deserve growth. And thank you very much for this question. Before answering to this question, I would like to mention that this year in February, our country celebrated 70 years of diplomatic relationships. Our cooperation with Indonesia has long-term history. And in August this year, Indonesia will celebrate 75 years of its independence. These two dates we will celebrate together this year. As for the topic of the forum that did not take place in Moscow, this topic is really very important and up to date. It should be mentioned that development of infrastructure, human capital would be two important components in economic policy of Indonesian government. Several years ago, Indonesian President Joko Widodo promoted an idea of transformation of Indonesia into sea country, as far as the country consists of more than 17,000 islands. That is why for this country it is very important to get the modern transport infrastructure, communication, energy. These are the branches that are very attractive for international companies, including Russian companies. It would be proper to say that, speaking of energy, by 2024, the country is planning to increase the total power by 27 megawatts. Currently, large-scale projects are being implemented in the sphere of energy. Other promising industries would be transport and communications. I would say that in every sector of economy, speaking of the directions that we've mentioned, the Russian companies are participating and elaborating different projects. For example, in energy, we're working on development of the floating power station. We still have the proposal from Rosatom on commissioning of the small reactor in Indonesia. One of the Russian investment groups will take part in the tender for development of the road infrastructure. I would say that the perspective is very positive. I hope that the projects will go on, and we see the interest from the Indonesian side. They are interested in our modern technologies, in our investments. Here we see the mutual interest, both from the Russian and from the Indonesian side. Thank you very much, Sergey. And on our side, we would like to express the hope and follow our relationships, how these relationships develop, and we will follow how everything you've mentioned will be brought back to life. And speaking of the opportunity to talk to you, I would like to welcome the colleague. Being one of the moderators of this INNOPROM program, I would say that we are representatives of the Russian Chamber of Trade and Commerce, and it's nice to recognize that our colleagues are present here, and I would like to welcome Mr. Atam. I would like to welcome you as a colleague from the center of Russia, from the Sverdlovsk region, and from the city where the INNOPROM traditionally takes place. Mr. Atam, I would like to ask the following question. With great pleasure and with great interest, we follow those publications that we receive from your country, and which cannot but make us happy about the success that Indonesia makes in terms of innovative development of the country. As far as the main topic of INNOPROM is the innovations in industry, hence it would be nice to recognize and to speak about what I've read in publications and how seriously Indonesia is developing in such directions as aerospace technology, aerospace industry, information, digital technologies, communication technologies. Of course, it's totally clear that the Russian companies are extremely interested in moving forward in this direction, close hand in hand together and cooperate. That is why I would like to ask the following question. We're a bit concerned. Of course, we understand it's a competitive environment. It's normal to compete for such a region and for such a country. Many countries compete for this region, but we are very much interested, and the audience today is very much interested in emotional perception of the Indonesian authorities and partners with the Russian colleagues, because there are efforts that are being implemented by some countries to constrain our ideas in this direction. That is why I would like to ask you about your opinion, the opinion of your colleagues on further development of Russian and Indonesian relationships. Thank you very much in advance.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank you, the organizers, and I'd like to thank the Ministry of Industry and Trade, who has invited us to this prestigious event. And I think you touched upon a very basic question there. What underlies the relationship between Indonesia and Russia? And I think it goes back that structurally, we have so many similarities between the two countries. First of all, the two countries are large in size. We are the biggest. Indonesia happens to be the biggest archipelago in the world, and Russia happens to be the largest land area of the world. So in size, physically, we're large size. Second, in terms of population, both countries have large populations. Indonesia has 260 million people, and Russia has about 146 million people. In terms of economy, the size of economy, Indonesia's economy is about $1 trillion, while Russia is about $1.8 trillion. So we are natural partners. And the way we feel, I think, is a partnership. We are big nations, we are proud nations. That is the underlying relationship between Indonesia and Russia as we see it. Now, we can talk about statistics, we can talk about exports, imports, and so forth, which I will touch upon later. But what cannot be captured in statistics is one thing. It is the eagerness of both sides of Russians coming to Indonesia, Russian businessmen coming to Indonesia, exploring the market, trying to understand, wanting to understand. That is something that is not reflected in statistics, but that is happening on the ground. Also, Indonesians, the number of Indonesians that are excited to see Russian businesses coming to Indonesia is tremendous. Also, you can also look at it in terms of culture. You can look at it in terms of tourism. The number of tourists coming to Russia, Indonesian tourists coming to Russia, is on an increase tremendously. It is very popular now to go to Russia. Likewise, the number of tourists coming to Indonesia has also increased tremendously. I believe in 2019, the number of tourists has risen to about 125,000 tourists. And with it, I also believe that it will bring more Russian businesses to Indonesia. It will also make, it will also at the same time bring Indonesian business to Russia. So that is on the ground level where these things happen. But you also asked me about, or you touched upon a couple of issues with regards to innovation. I can name two industries on top of my head. One industry is infrastructure, which you also mentioned. Indonesia currently has about 2,000 kilometers of toll roads. Within the next, I think within the next 10 years, it is trying to go to double the length of it to about 4,500 kilometers. Infrastructure is very important because logistic cost is important in Indonesia as well. And for that, I believe that Russian companies are interested. At the moment, Russian companies with their technology, one company that I know of, NTS for instance, is involved in multi-lane free flow. It is involved in weight in motion, in high technologies that are applicable in the transportation sector. Also, you mentioned about aviation. Aviation, I believe there is a cooperation that is in the works between Russian and Indonesian companies with regards to regional aircraft, 90 passengers plus propeller aircraft, which are very popular in the region. I mean, Indonesia consists of 17,000 islands. From now until the end of time, we will still be 17,000 islands. The only way you can transport from one place to another place is by aircraft. So we represent a large market, as does Russia. And I think the cooperation in the realm of aviation, for instance, is one place that we can work upon. Now, let me just, before I stop, let me make a remark with regards to COVID, the pandemic. One, I mean, we always look at the COVID pandemic in a negative light, but what the COVID pandemic has also taught us is that it is so easy now, as we are doing today, to get together, form ideas between Indonesian companies and Russian companies. Just this week, just last week, I've had so many meetings between Indonesian companies and Russian companies, which are now so much more easy to perform because now because of the pandemic, people are now used to using video conferences in communicating. So rather than traveling many tens of hours between Jakarta and Moscow, Jakarta, Vladivostok, or St. Petersburg, now it's very easy to just turn on and do a Zoom call. And we can do the same task. We can exchange ideas, we can do demonstration, we can do presentation. And that, I think, is an avenue that that will make business between the two countries much easier. So I think there are plus and minuses, but I think it's a good time, an opportune time to actually increase the relationship, the economic relationship between Indonesia and Russia with regard to both trade and investment. Because in terms of trade, we now know that it's also important. One of our key priorities at the moment is also with regard to food security. And as the other speakers have also mentioned before from China, whether they're from China or from Africa, I mean, food is very important, as it is to us. We import 100% of our grain. We don't have any wheat in Indonesia, but we are consumers. We are producers of the largest producers of noodles in the world. At the same time, we're also importing so much beef, meat. And I think that is also an avenue where Russia and Indonesia can work together to fulfill the needs in the spirit of food security. So thank you again.
Спасибо, господин Ратам. Это были очень важные ответы.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ratam. These answers were very important, and thank you for your optimism. And I think that after our meeting at this platform, the Far Indonesia will be closer to us. And I would like to thank Mr. Gruzdev for having our trade representatives together. Ahead, we have Europe and America, but both moderators have their personal questions to you. First of all, I would like to give floor to Andrei Besedin. Please ask your question, and then Surena Ganesevich will ask the question. Thank you once again. I have a unique chance that I will take. I have a strategic question. I do understand and I do see the efforts that our country is undertaking and the Ministry of Trade and Industry is undertaking through our trade representatives abroad. The system of the chambers of trade and commerce is trying to go along with this positive approach and a recovery of our positions and experiencing the new markets. We understand that the global task for our country is the high level, to maximum extent possible, of trade with other countries. But we do understand that there could be some strategic ideas. There could be some countries where it's simple for us to maintain the level of trade and economic relationships. And there were some countries who we see here as our attendees where it would be very important for us to restart our relationships and to restore the level of economic relationships that we had previously. Unfortunately, there are some countries that would be in the second or the third group of our interest due to maybe their intention to establish trade relationships with us. But let me go through this global map and mention our main emphasis. Please tell me about the emphasis. Do you understand the question that I asked? Thank you for this question. Being the government employee, I understand different questions, even those that are really very complex. And I will try to give a straight answer. Here we should differentiate between the business and politics. In the first term, business is used to being very transparent and operate with cost and profit and norms of profit per unit. And no matter what obstacles the politicians create on the route of our goods and industries, we would say that the businesses are oriented on the correct route. And even those partners who you mentioned as an example, I would see that the majority of these partners, we see the increase in turnover. We have supplies in spite of different decisions or regimes. And here, the task for the government would be to speak about the economy, no, not about the politics. The main task is to support the required tendencies and to overcome the obstacles. And if we speak about the geography, it's very multi-sphere. In the first turn, you should have correct and good relationships with your partners. This is evident, and this is one of the priority. That is why the Eurasian Union is really an important factor, because this is the deep integration. We have 74 freedoms that have been declared. They are being implemented in terms of human capital and resources. If we speak about CIS countries, we are close from the cultural point of view, but we have economic cooperations which cannot be torn apart. Because if we tear these relations, especially in terms of the existing conditions, if these relations are torn apart under the influence of some external factors, so we see these value-added chains that are increasing, and hence we need to speak about localization of the production in other countries, and thus you will be able to minimize the cost and the loss. And this is what we faced when we were facing the issue of production of medical devices when we were on the peak of pandemic in Russia. If we speak about the Asian region, the South Asian, Eastern Asia, this is really the matter of priority for us, because due to the economic issues and due to the fact that this is the new center of the global growth, this is really a very promising part of population where we see the certain types and patterns in demand. We see the demand for new technologies, new industrial solutions, and we speak not just from the point of view of the trade of commodities, but we are speaking about the other directions in our cooperation. And this was mentioned by our colleagues from Egypt and Indonesia. And this is what we see in terms of our policy of moving in this direction. Speaking about Europe, European countries are perceived by us as a whole. This is our united trade partner, especially speaking from the point of view of investment. Investments are really very stable, and the Russian market is very attractive for the European business. But we were speaking about the services, and here the Russian service providers are very competitive in terms of the European market. Here I would say that our IT companies have very good history of record. And speaking about the Latin America, I would say that it's also a key partner for the Russian Federation. It has certain specifics, and the major emphasis is made on agriculture cooperation. But here we need to tackle the issues related to logistics, because without any support from funding institutions and without any support in logistics, it will be very difficult to be very competitive, speaking of the cost of the product. That is why partial localization of production, probably it would be the answer to the challenges that are being created by the long distances. Probably this is it. And speaking of last year, I would say that it was very demonstrative, and it demonstrated the cooperation of Russia and Africa. This was not an attempt to become the partner for the African continent, and it was not an attempt to demonstrate that we are going along with the trend. It was not the issue of trend. It was the issue of how to concentrate and gather our historical partners that we used to have in the period of the Soviet Union, because even previously our country had developed the strategic partnership, and discuss it at the existing stage. What can we provide to each other, and how we can build up our cooperation in order to be different from the cooperation with other countries. And we succeeded in this, and hence we're speaking not about the simple trade, because simple trade from our side would be just the supplies of equipment or finished products and import of raw materials and agricultural products. But we were speaking about the agenda for the future. We're speaking about the new technologies, joint ventures in the field of technology, transport machinery. I do see you, Anton, but I was waiting for too long. Probably you would give me some time to conclude. And I even canceled my trip to the Council of Federations. That is why let me finish. We see it as a new direction, as a new priority. And in the forthcoming years, we would see the scaling of projects, not only as the projects in our zone in Egypt, but it will also go forward, and we would like the Russian technologies and Russian solutions to be developed for the interests of the growth of economies of African countries. Thank you very much for such detailed answer. It gives me a chance to ask the second question, which is very close to this one. Speaking about the promotion of the Russian and territorial brand into external markets, is there any kind of development of the model of the soft integration into the global product line, or it's an aggressive entrance of the Russian brand into the external market? Thank you. Thank you for this question. I would say that I support the cooperation on the basis of mutual respect, because in business, aggressive model of behavior sometimes seems more successful at the very beginning, but I'm deeply convinced that we do not need to concentrate the resources if the door is closed. We should look for open doors, and we should expand our window of opportunities. And what we're talking about, we need to think of how to start with the review. We need to understand how to listen to the partner, and we need to understand that the point of view of our partner could be different from your own. And this would be probably the best compromise. We should offer what is in demand, and then we should discuss the mutual compromise and terms of cooperation. In this respect, I would say I'm more supportive of professional approach to work. And probably it would be more of our internal issue, but it will be also interesting for the representatives of the foreign countries who are here. And this would be the mutual obligations of businesses and the government. Because when the entrepreneurs speak of their ideas of and their perception of support and help from the government, they should be very good representatives of the country, and they should be ready for operating in the external market, and we should provide them the instruments. And this is the way how we built up our line of behavior, how we produce the measures of support, and how we interact with the platforms where we have the dialogue platform with trade representatives. So we should have the understanding of how to use the window of opportunities and how to promote the Russian brand. And this is the specific of Made in Russia brand. And this is the solution, very efficient from the economic point of view, and this is not imposed in one package with the financial instrument, but it's oriented on the proper positioning and on the proper niche in the market. This is what I would like to say in my answer to your question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, this is the end of our tour in Asia and Africa. At 3:50 p.m. we will continue our marathon of capitals. We will start with Europe and then we will end up in the Southern America. I would like to thank everyone, Mr. Ilyushin, Rostomakhov, Makrousov, and our honored guest, Mr. Lukun Alaez, and Mr. Khurram Fatikhovich, Mr. Atam, thank you very much for being with us. And I do hope, Alexei, that you will find the time for our second portion of our marathon in the capitals, and we'll start at 3:50 p.m. Moscow time, and in about 2 or 3 minutes we'll start our main strategic session of INNOPROM. That is why I'm not saying goodbye to our honored speakers, and we will see each other very soon. Thank you very much.